if you actually look at the dangers of GMO crops, if you look up GMO danger online, there are countless studies by well-known colleges, by well-known professors, all sorts of people. And the mainstream media likes to get into the mindset of, oh, I'm sorry, that study was incomplete. Oh, I'm sorry, that study is irrelevant. We have these new studies done by the very people that make the crops that show the exact opposite and that they're good for you. Put 2 and 2 together, folks. If you have a shred of gray matter in your brain, connect the dots.
I did just that. I saw this pop up at my feed and I was like, wonder what I could find when it comes to the dangers of GMO. And I did just a quick little easy research. Went around on Microsoft Bing, crossed over to Google a little bit, and lo and behold, it's right there in your face. But they don't talk about that. Here we go. So this was an easy article to find right here. I just pretty much went into the Bing thing, which is, it's like Google, I guess, and put in there GMO dangers. And so this is something you can do on your own if you got time. And it's not talked about enough. And basically this article is written by a person named Jonathan R. Lethem, PhD. This guy's got a doctorate, and this thing dates all the way back to 2015, and here we are in 2025, which is 10 years later. And I remember as a child being introduced to the idea of genetically modified food and trees and different things like that. And I've got a few theories that aren't scientifically proven yet that I haven't done enough research on, but it would be opinion and something to kind of just think about. So, by the way, this is where I stand, so you don't think I'm trying to feed you misinformation. I'm only giving you at this right second an opinionated piece. You hear about the fact that they make genetically modified trees now so that they grow faster, pine trees and such, because we need a higher yield for the demand of products. So, so when you genetically modify a pine tree so that it grows, 2-3 times as fast so that you can get more cuts out of a single place instead of cutting old growth, which doesn't hardly exist anymore at this point. They've made pine trees grow faster, so they genetically modify them, and of course those pine trees naturally make a thing called pollen, which all plants do, so that they can fertilize each other and then procreate. And you hear about all the allergies that exist nowadays, and it could be just me that that think about this, but or see it, notice it, but people's with the ramped up allergic reactions to the environment around them. Is this a byproduct of genetically modified plants that exist on this planet now and making their genetically modified pollen? And it's not compatible with our human makeup because we have not yet adapted to the new style of pollen that's being emitted. That's just opinion. Something to think about. Be nice to do a little research on that one day, and maybe we will. But what we do know is this scientist and doctor right here, in the beginning of the article, talks about, it says, by training, and by the way, this is wrote in 2015, it kind of updated in 2019, apparently. I don't know what they mean by updated. I don't know if that means information's been scrubbed, because that happens a lot with online articles. Books are great because nothing can change unless you physically rewrite the book and then re-release it. People then suspect. So it says, by training, I am a plant biologist. In the early 1990s, I was busy making genetically modified plants, often called GMOs for genetically modified organisms, as part of the research that led to my PhD into these plants. We were putting DNA from various foreign organisms, such as viruses and bacteria. That's what they were doing. We were doing this, or they were. Okay? And you can look this person up, Jonathan R. Lethem, PhD. This is credible. And it says, I wasn't at the outset concerned about the possible effects of genetically modified plants on human health or the environment. One reason for this was a lack of concern. By the way, the beginnings of this was that it was still a very young, I as in this person writing this article, was a very young scientist feeling my way in the complex world of biology. And of scientific research and other reasons was that we hardly imagined that GMOs like ours would be grown or eaten. Okay? And so far as I was concerned, GMOs were The research were for research purposes only. Gradually, however, it became clear that certain companies they thought differently. Some of my older colleagues shared their skepticism with me that commercial interests were running far ahead of scientific knowledge. I listened carefully, and I didn't disagree. In other words, saying, wait a minute, we were just doing this for certain research purposes. This was never designed to be for human consumption and grown on a mass scale in the environment, because that pollutes the environment. And I've got a few more opinions I'll throw in here when I read a little bit more. But it says here, today, over 20 years later, GMO crops, especially soybeans, corn, papaya, canola, and cotton, are commercially grown in numerous parts of the world. Depending on which country you live in, GMO may be unlabeled and therefore unknowingly abundant in your diet. Processed foods are likely to contain ingredients from GMO crops such as corn and soy. Most crops, however, are still non-GMO. By the way, this was back in 2015. Okay, we're 10 years into this now, including rice, wheat, barley, oats, tomatoes, grapes, beans, etc. for meat eaters. The mode of GMO consumption is different, and there are no GMO animals used in farming, although genetically modified salmon have been pending FDA approval since 1993. However, animal fed, especially in factory farms, is likely to be mostly GMO, and corn and GMO soybeans. In this case, the labeling issue and potential impacts complicated even further. So, like I said, I remember this is an old article. So a lot of this stuff is now being incorporated into your daily diet, which is rice, barley, beans, tomatoes, grapes, beans, and all this other thing. So now they're even making, and we're into this era now of processed meats being printed out in facilities using some kind of bacteria and bug poop. So this is where we're at. So we had scientists at one time and doctors that were speaking and out against this kind of consumption for human use, and also the animals that consume this stuff too. So cow farts are dangerous. So now we're going to genetically modify food to make it so they don't fart, and then the meat that's processed after that, does that affect their? How does what's the trickle down effect? And in the article, and by the way, too, the bee population that is used, that's natural to the world, that helps to pollinate and grow and sustain natural plant life, so that we can sustain. Because without plants, we don't sustain. This earth is doomed. Have dwindling numbers every year. We're not seeing a surge of bees being produced, and they're genetically modifying those into mosquitoes too. Remember the Zika virus? Whatever happened with that? But anyways, with those dwindling populations, is this a direct result of the GMO pollen that they encounter that's not, and it is causing some kind of problems? I mean, I know that there's a lot of things, especially when it talks about how some of the concerns of GMO is practical, or just practical. I have read numerous GMO risk assessment applications. There are documents that governments rely on to prove their safety, though these documents are quite long and quite complex. Their length is misleading in that they primarily ask trivial questions. Furthermore, the experiments described within them are often very inadequate and sloppily executed, just like what we just seen at the beginning of this video of how the studies like this person was doing versus the ones that were being compiled by the companies who are doing the GMO often mislead and construe information for the favorability of their product. Furthermore, the experiments described within them are often inadequate and sloppily executed. Like I said earlier, scientific controls are often being missing, and procedures and reagents are badly described, and the results are often ambiguous and uninterpretable. The consequence, by the way, the government regulators who examine the data are effectively reliant on the word of the applicants that research supports whatever the applicant claims. There are often elementary scientific flaws too. For example, applications routinely ignore and dismiss obvious red flags, such as experiments yielding unexpected outcomes. Now, I'll dig into this a little bit more. The dangers of GMO, aside from grave doubts about the quality and integrity of risk assessments, I also, by the way, this person I is, and the person who wrote this article, have specific science-based concerns over GMO. These concerns are mostly particular to specific transgenes and traits. And what I mean by that is, me as the person reading this article, is many GMO plants are engineered to contain their own insecticides. Now, as I read from this article and the studies that this person put together, and what this person knows because of the fact that this is something they've been doing their whole life, and this was written in 2015 before skewed articles were put out to try to water down what's really going on. These GMOs, which include maize, cotton, and soybeans, are called Bt plants. Bt plants get their name because they incorporate a transgene that makes a protein-based toxin, sometimes called cryotoxin, from the bacterium Bacillus thuringiensis. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to try it one more time. Thuringiensis. Many Bt crops are stacked, meaning they contain multiplicity of cryotoxins. Their makers believe each of these Bt toxins is insect-specific and safe. However, there are multiple reasons to doubt both safety and specificity. In other words, their ability to tailor these cryotoxins to just an invasive insect that would attack this crop. In other words, they're like, we'll make a genetically modified plant, and you won't have to use insecticides as much. And this plant will not need as much water, which makes it environmentally safe. Which means that we've tailored this for this, not for you. It's good, but basically, it's saying in this article that that's not so much the case. That a lot of these toxins can actually be harmful to the animals and the people who consume them. One concern is that Bacillus thuringiensis I'm probably butchering that word, is all but indistinguishable from the well-known anthrax bacterium, Bacillus anthracis. I laugh because this is what they're doing to us. Another reason that Bt insecticides share structural similarities with ricin. Ricin is famous dangerous plant toxin. A tiny amount of this, by the way, which was used to assassinate a Bulgarian writer and defector George Markov in 1978. A third reason for concern is that the mode of action of Bt proteins is not understood. Vachon et al. I'm just reading AL, some of the stuff here in 2012. Yet the axiomatic in science that effective risk assessment requires a clear understanding of the mechanism of the action of any GMO transgene. So they appropriate experiments that can be devised to affirm or refute safety. All this is doubly troubling because some cryoproteins are toxic towards human cells. This was also found in 1999. A second concern follows that from GMOs being often resistant to herbicides, the resistance of this is an invitation to farmers for them to spray large quantities of herbicides, and so many do. As research recently shown, commercial soybeans sold today routinely contain quantities of herbicide called Roundup glyphosate that its maker Monsanto once described as extreme back in 2014. Now these are normal. These levels are normal now. Back in 2014, it was to use this much herbicide was considered bad. But ever since they decided to make GMO crops and things that you're going to consume, and notice that the farmers need more of this product to be able to get the field ready for the plant the next day, the next cycle. Oh, it's fine. You don't think there's a coercion between Monsanto and some of these GMO companies? Being the fact that they need more of this product means more profit, and and so, anyways, money is ruling all this at this point. Glyphosate has been in the news recently because the World Health Organization no longer considers it as a relatively harmless chemical, but there are herbicides applied to GMOs which are easily of equal concern. The herbicide glufosinate made by Bayer kills plants because it inhibits the plant's enzymes glutamine synthetase. There's a lot of big words here. It's just, in other words, it just keeps the I don't want to bore you to death, but I'm basically reading you an article that shows you just how dangerous GMO food is. The ubiquitous enzyme is found also in fungi, bacteria, and animals, and consequently glufosinate is toxic to most organisms. So, there's this, and you can. this article right here is from T. Colin Campbell, Center for Nutrition Studies, and it was a simple search: GMO dangers. That's all I had to look up. By the way, thank you for taking time to hang out with me while I read you this stuff. I know that I talk a lot about political stuff, but right now I'm sort of in limbo with what's going on in the political world. I'm fully supporting what Donald Trump's doing so far as trying to make this country great. There's things that have happened along the way that's got me very questionable about some of the people that are working in Trump's administration and some of the motives. And I think that we're going to have to wait a little bit to see what happens. I haven't forgot about the Epstein stuff. It still bothers me to this day. So I'm not letting that go. But I think that right now, I want to spend a little bit of time on trying to reinterest the public in corruption at the ground roots level, which we were so deeply interested in before Trump was president. Whenever Biden was running things and we knew there was an open corruption scheme going on, it was the talk of the town about what Bill Gates was into, what Fauci was into, what Peter Hotez was into, what experimental jabs they were trying to come up with, the future for the new pandemics, the food that was killing us. And then Trump gets into office, and I noticed that a lot of that stuff's been put on the back burner because we're so concerned about the next move with the deep state, which is very much a relevant concern. But I think that we're all being distracted, either on purpose or by accident. I don't know, but definitely there is a distraction level going on that with now Bill Gates isn't the trending, problem, and neither is Fauci. It seems that we're more concerned about just the fact that we have activist judges, which is very concerning. But it's almost like it may not be a calculated move, but it seems to be a move to get people have now moved on to a whole new concern, but it's not actually the root of the problem. We've not really glorified any of the wins that RFK Jr. has made in the Make America Healthy Again. There are some things that concern me about RFK Jr.'s tactics behind that, like it's a quiet rollout of some kind of digital ID when it comes to, so a lot of things are going on, and we need to not lose focus that we were so hyper focused on before Trump was president. And so we will talk about political things, but I want to bring to the attention to what's really going on. And it is very concerning. But on the other hand, there are humorous things that are taking place, like New York protesters organized "We Are with Colbert" rally, but only 20 people showed up. His numbers have sort of surged recently since his cancellation, and that's normal. We'll see stuff like that happen because basically people had forgotten that even Colbert exists because they tuned him out. And so now we're just trying to figure out what this dude's up to. And the fact that there's not money going to him outside of the network, it's ironic that we see a lot of, key players in Hollywood and all these television shows being, dropped because there seems to be lack of money to fund this. So I don't think we'll see him in the limelight. Supposedly, there's going to be a hiatus of The View, which would be great. Propaganda is strong, and it's really taking a toll on the American people and everybody around the world. Yep. Elon Musk shares a meme of hoping the unalivement of George Soros. Ain't that weird that the Hulk's gone and it comes in threes. The Hulk is there are all these glorifications of that, but a lot of people that we hold sort of in our a positive mindset, they're gone, and George Soros is still here. What a strange world we live in. But they just looking at some of the headlines that I'm seeing right now. Grassley responds to Trump's request to cancel August recess. and get judicial nominees confirmed as Democrats obstruct. So this is something that's history in the making, by the way. It used to be a recess, and the reason, and that got, by the way, that recess got started because it had to do with farming back when was it Abraham Lincoln and George, one of those presidents, George Washington or Abraham Lincoln. Sorry for me not remembering the exact details, but I kind of vaguely remember reading about this, about farming. And so they would go on a 40-day hiatus for a little while so they could help the families and focus on getting everything together, because we used to be productionists and make things and do stuff. And we used to be self-sustaining and grow crops that weren't GMO. And so that meant that some people had to go help. And that allowed for those people to do that. And anyways, this 40-day hiatus is now being interrupted on purpose, because in that 40-day time, the president can put in place to somebody that could be acting so-and-so for a year. And it could be attorney general. It could be DOJ. It could be all kind of things that could be enacting that for up to a year, I think, something like that. And so being the fact that this is understood, a history making into progress, unprecedented, every 5 days, these people will be coming back into Congress just so that they can say that Congress is not closed, which would then head off any of Trump's appointments, because they're afraid that he could put in somebody that would actually do something. And this is pretty wild, and Republicans are taking part in this as well. So, something to think about. Obama owes the U.S. taxpayers $32 million. That's a start. And how just roll through some of the headlines of what's going on, and not a whole lot massive going. That's why I'm doing a lot more stuff when it comes to government conspiracies and what they're doing to us, because right now we're in limbo. I just want to see I want to see some arrests. I want to see some. I know that Obama's got presidential immunity, but I want to see something. Give me something, and I don't want no Bob and Indy. I want the real deal. I want somebody big. Go after some of these Clintons. Get Hillary Clinton locked up. Put her in a federal, pound you into a prison. So, anyways, Cincinnati had that white person beatdown event, and that's finally starting to be looked into. If you flip the tables in Cincinnati where those white people were beat down by a group of non-white people, and you flip the tables where it was a group of non-white people being beat down by white people, how would that go down? Anyhow, I'll keep digging into more of these interesting things that's going on behind the scenes in government, and what's going on with the corruption, and how projects have been laid out for depopulation, and making us sick. If you're new to my channel and you're watching this for the first time, go back a few videos that I recently did, and I talk about some of the really open air events that the government did to us. And it's easy to find this stuff too, by the way. So it's not like I'm digging really hard. And so that means if you don't believe what I'm saying, you can easily check behind me, which I suggest you do. And you can always leave comments in the comment sections critiquing any of my work, because I'll take those critiques and I'll use that to make this a better level of content. And so, do I believe Trump is bad and involved in Epstein in a bad way? I don't think so. I think that there's been a lot of interaction just due to the fact of your people, places, and things. And if you've been to the grocery store in a small or big town, you always see somebody you know. And it was probably some dopehead you used to hang out with back in the day. And they'll acknowledge your existence. And then it's always sort of cordial to say hello back. It doesn't mean that you're smoking crack with them. It just means that you know these people and you're around them because you're in your circle because of where you're at. And that would go to also for some of the stuff we've seen on the left when we see Epstein with people. That doesn't necessarily now Bill Gates, definitely something crazy went on there. But like I said, there's a lot of implications just due to being victim of associates. And so, that's just where the information is going to be really hard to decipher. But you can bet that if there's any interaction between Trump and Epstein, and there's probably been people around Epstein knowing what he's been up to for years and followed Epstein without Epstein's knowledge, or maybe Epstein's knowledge, that were cameramen and videographers that just sort of laid off to the side and waited for certain people to interact with him and took pictures so that they could have usable content on a more grassroots level. That could be the case, because that would, if there was some form of serious implications with Epstein and Trump, then this would have been done during the Biden DOJ to really keep Trump from being in office. But of course, we are living a political show, so there's always a level of, let's just see what happens next. Thank you guys for tuning in. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for watching this whole video. Don't forget to hit that like button too. It really helps the algorithm. Take it easy, and I'm out.
There are 9 subspecies of tiger, 19 subspecies of coyote, 2 different species of gorilla that each have 2 sets of subspecies, 8 species of zebra, 2 subspecies of cow, 38 subspecies of wolf, 36 species of rattlesnake, and 5 species of chimp, etc. And yet human beings who evolved separately for hundreds of millions of years in completely different environments are so similar that they can't be classified differently in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, nature sure is something, huh?